Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Goodness, some of us have spent our entire day on this Zoom channel already. I think I saw some of you at 9 o'clock and you've just all stayed on. So I hope everyone's having a great day. And I'm excited to talk with you a little bit about kind of phase two or part two or number two or whatever you want to call it for the KW investment group. And got a bunch of people coming into the waiting room, so I'm just going to kill a smidge of time. For those of you who, let me start by saying this, because some of what I say a little later will make better sense and or perhaps be a little bit more comfortable if you have a little bit of background on me. And so besides my duties for you each day as the broker and owner of our organization, I do also have what used to be a second full-time job as a real estate investor, which I've now leveraged to a property manager and a property management company. So I just get to buy and earn, and they get to kind of do all the rest. And so my expertise is really in multifamily, three to four family properties. I buy most of my properties in Waterbury, Naugatuck. I do own something in New London and perhaps another soon in New London, and have explored places like New Haven and New Britain and things of that nature. Why over there and not in or around Fairfield County? Because when I started doing this, what I found was I could save a down payment way faster if the property cost me only $150,000 or $200,000 versus a property costing me $350,000 or $450,000. And I found that with kind of the balancing of rents, the return on my investment was pretty similar. So that's why I chose there. I've been doing it for just about 8 years now. I'm working on my 23rd and 24th building or property, which will bring me to just shy of 70 rental units. So just to give you a little background for those of you who are new to me, that's kind of the other thing that I do on the side. And part of why that's important is that I bring that expertise to each of you as investors in a group investment. So I think we're good to start now. Our waiting room is finally clear. So let me give you kind of a 10 or 12 minute overview of what this looks like. The good news is we do have some folks, I see at least three or four of our partners from the first round of this. About probably a little less than a year ago, we made that announcement that we would be looking at getting a group of investors together. It's frankly, it's been in my head for over a decade to have those of us who want to pursue investment real estate, and yet either one of two things is real for us. Either we don't yet have the funds to do it on our own, or we have the funds and we just don't have the desire to do it on our own, right? One of those two things could well be true for you, which is why you're here today. And so we finally, a little less than a year ago, announced our intention to put this together. We had a whole ton of interest. We ended up with 20 partners in our first KW investment group that is lovingly called Command Capital. And so Command Capital, as of today, owns 2-3 families in Waterbury. And for those of you who are members of Command Capital, if you didn't see my email of earlier, Saturday morning, I woke up and purchased you a third. So the
woohoo!
Yes, indeed. The plan all along for that particular investment group was 3, based on the money we collected. We figured out that we could do 3. We were waiting for something to either be a little less money or to earn a little bit more from our first 2 to build those numbers up so we could buy the third. And then something came on Saturday morning that really fit the bill and ended up not being quite as much money as the first two that we purchased. So it kind of fit right in with where we are today. So I'm excited. I will know in a couple of days whether or not that's going to stick together, but I don't see a reason why it won't. So that'll kind of max out that particular LLC's investment opportunity for the time being, until or unless those 20 partners all agree to increase their capital contribution, or we earn enough and save it to buy another. Which is why, the second iteration of this is so important, because there may be some of those partners who want to do it again, and their opportunity, just like yours, would be to be involved in the second LLC. How that works. So we look at some minimum and maximum investments, kind of loosely, but the minimum investment we look at, based on what we experienced last time, is $10,000. And the reason that we look at $10,000 is because with less than $10,000, we could make a $5,000 investment work. My concern, though, is that at a $5,000 investment, you would be such a small percentage of the actual ownership of these properties that, when it came time for distributions, I fear that you would be looking at your numbers saying, okay, really, that's it? Like, what was the point of me investing in this? So at least at $10,000, your numbers are well, they're at least twice as much as they would be at $5,000, and so the returns start to look like something. So a minimum investment of $10,000. We had set last time a maximum investment of $40,000. I don't know that we're going to be too strict about the maximum this time. The reason we set it is because I wanted to be fair, to say, look, if you have 50 or 60 or 70 or $80,000 to push into an organization like this, an LLC like this, you probably have enough money to do this on your own, right? So, and I'll help you do it on your own if you want to do it on your own. If you're unsure how to do it or what to do, I'd be happy to assist in that. And it's funny, because a lot of you came back and said, yeah, you know what, I do have more. I'm just not really interested in doing it on my own. And so that kind of aha for me last time said, all right, well, maybe we're not going to necessarily limit the top end. We'll have to see what comes back from all of you and what kind of interest there is, and then make some decisions around that. What are the obligations of the investors? The obligations of the investors are minimal to zero. And what that means is this is more like, putting your money into a mutual fund, right? Whereby once you say yes, the manager of the investments, who for the time being is me, organizes the LLC, creates the operating agreement for everybody to sign. I scout and locate the properties. I purchase the properties. I manage the investment through our management company, manage the financials and everything else related to it. So it's a very hands-off investment. And if it's all right if I just kind of speak plainly, part of the reason for all of that is, with a large group of people, if it was not a hands-off investment, we'd never make any headway, right? Because with 20 different opinions about what we should purchase and how it should be purchased, and you just never get anywhere, right? So that's the idea of really kind of being more like, I don't love the term silent investors, because that sounds like, we're muzzling people, but you get my point, right? It's the idea of trusting in the manager of that investment to buy the right things and manage them properly, so that you get the best return on that. As I said, the initial manager is me, and where we look is wherever we get the best return. I look statewide currently. There is a question that often gets asked about, would we consider going outside of the state? My answer to that is maybe. I don't really have any experience in doing that yet, right? And so what I bring to the table is an expertise in a certain style of investment property in certain areas of our state, and I would look, at least for the shorter term, to stick with what I know, because that's how I can best serve you by sticking with what I know. The good news is I'll never use you as a guinea pig. I'd use myself as a guinea pig first, and then if it was successful, then kind of bring it back to you guys. But you don't have to worry about being used as a guinea pig. The minimum commitment of the funds to the LLC, once you say yes and write the check and sign the operating agreement, the minimum commitment is 3 years, 36 months. Again, with large investment groups like this, it gets really difficult to start managing things where somebody puts in 10 grand and then all of a sudden, decides that they didn't recognize they had to fix their car. And so they come back to me 3 weeks later and say, can I have my money back because I have to fix my car, right? And so the answer is yes. However, there are penalties built into the operating agreement for early withdrawal. So 3 years as a minimum is what you should expect in terms of the money. Distributions. So distributions. What we discussed in the first LLC was that distributions ultimately initially would be annual. And what I mean by initially is the first year. So we wouldn't look to distribute anything for a year to just make sure the investments were stable and that we had a reserve fund and that we had consistent enough income such that we could then begin distributions. After that, I would look at quarterly distributions. Again, with a larger group, with people owning fractional interests in the 4%, 6%, 8%, 10%, 12% range, monthly it's a little bit of overkill, right? So we hold them then until quarterly, so that the money that you receive at least looks like something. After the 36-month hold period, then we get to decide, right? We get to decide on the future of the investment depending on its performance. I will tell you that for me personally, what that almost always means is I just keep holding them, right? My investment strategy with these properties is not see if it makes some money from an appreciative perspective and then dump it. It's a cash flow conversation. However, I don't get to make that decision unilaterally. 3 years from now, we get to sit and have a conversation around what the group is looking at. As the manager of the investment, I do get to ultimately make the decision based on the input of the rest of the investors. But what I would say to you is, if you're not in this for the long haul, then it may not be the best place for you to put your money, because these kinds of investments ultimately pay off over time. Which brings us to a really important point, right? For those of you who have never done anything like this before, this is not a get-rich-quick scenario. This is not like you can dump $10,000 into a group investment and 3 years from now be like, woohoo! I don't have to sell real estate anymore. I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm moving to wherever. That's just not the way this works, right? It's a build over a long period of time. When you have one is great, and 2 is better, and 3 is even better than that, and 6 is even better than that, right? And you just keep building and building and building. And over time, what happens is you wake up and say, wow, now what I'm earning monthly or quarterly from these actually equates to something. That doesn't happen overnight, right? So what do investors receive? Investors receive reports quarterly, right? And so quarterly is kind of a financial review and anything I have from the property management company. Again, I try really hard. We didn't. Command Capital hasn't received a report yet, simply because September 30th was the end of the first quarter where our financing, because they were the first ones. So we had to figure out all the money and the financing, and there was a lot of stuff going on in the back end that didn't allow for easy reporting of anything. And so we finally are through a full quarter as of September 30th. And so Command Capital, investors, you will receive by the end of this week or the first day or two of next week, your first quarterly report on where we stand. And it just happens to coincide with utilizing much of the rest of our funds to purchase that third property. And then each LLC does have a minimum of 2 investor meetings per year to discuss issues and opportunities and strategies and whatnot. So you can look forward to that. This is an investment for Keller Williams agents only, right? And so oftentimes I get asked, it's fine, but what happens if all of a sudden I become a Coldwell Banker agent after I've invested? That's a great question. You cannot keep your investment. The operating agreement is clear about if you're not affiliated with one of our brokerages, it's a forced sell, and there are penalties if you're forced to sell. Again, all of that is outlined in the operating agreement. So it is for us, right? It's not for anybody else. And if you choose to not be a part of us, that's okay too, right? We respect your decisions. You just don't get to keep your interests in the investments that are for our family members. So that's kind of the big picture. I'll open it up to questions. I think I see a bunch of things happening in the chat. So let me just kind of take a quick peek. See what's over there. If someone invested $10,000 in the first LLC, what is it worth today? And how much is the quarterly distribution? So there are going to be some things that I kind of can't answer. I mean, what is their $10,000 worth today? It's probably worth $10,000, right? I mean, like I said, this all came about in the last 6 to 8 months. We've taken about $250,000 and turned it into three properties, based on the appraisals for those properties is how we would value the company, and then that valuation multiplied by your percentage interest. But again, in such a short period of time, the investment itself is likely worth what it was. That's not the point of this. The point of this is cash flow, right? How much return on a $10,000 investment? So I'm gonna say 2 things. The first thing I'm going to say a number of times. So I'm sorry if you got it the first time, but I'm going to say it a whole lot of times. The discussion about money that we're going to have is not an earnings claim. I am not standing here telling you exactly what you're going to receive as a return on your investment. Instead, what I'm going to tell you is what I personally receive on these investments. And I can tell you, not quite tonight, but by the end of this week, I can tell you what Command Capital has earned. But remember, they're examples based on my own personal purchases and the purchases of the First Investment Group. It's not an earnings claim. It's not a promise that if you do this, this is what is going to happen to you. Because let's just have a quick conversation about investments, right? Do investments go up? Yes. Do investments go down? Yes, right? The very nature of it being an investment, right? You have an opportunity to make money and you have an opportunity to lose money. And I can't tell you today, if you decide to be in business with us as an investment group, which of those it will be. What I can tell you is that I've been doing this as a full-time second job for 8 years. And I haven't ever lost money. That includes purchasing a property in the very late, I think it was late November or early December of 2019. Okay, and so I bought this property. We took control of it. We started to have 2 of our 3 tenants go sideways on us and start to not pay their rent. And as we were taking action around them in the first quarter of 2020, anybody remember what happened in the first quarter of 2020? Right, and so all of a sudden then we had no opportunity to evict. And so we didn't get paid rent from those two particular tenants for 15 months. So how could I possibly say I'd never lost money? Well, because we finally took steps and convinced them to allow us to apply for one of these government programs that has been announced in the last couple of, last 12 months or so. And just last month, as we are approaching the 2-year anniversary of purchasing this property, just last month, got payments of, I don't know, $18,000 or so in back rent. And we expect another version of that to hit us again. So I've never lost money. You've got to look at it again long term. You can't look month to month or week to week, because not only it's like looking at, do any of you own stock and do you look at it every day? If you do, I would encourage you not to do that, right? Because it's like you want to put a gun to your head some days. Some days you're like doing the happy dance, and other days you want to run in front of a bus. So what I encourage you to do is recognize these are long-term investments. My criteria, my minimums, as property management became a must for me, and as pricing got a little higher across the state in the last almost 24 months, 18 months or so. My criteria used to be $1,000 a month per building net to me, right? So you collect the rents, you pay the mortgage, you pay all the expenses, you pay the property manager, and what I wanted left was $1,000 per building. I've recently adjusted that to a minimum of $800, simply because my $1,000 was pre-property management. Property managers take 10% of the rent that is collected. And so that's eaten into some of the viability of that $1,000 a month net. And as prices get a little higher, the opportunity to get a cash on cash return when you're having to put a little bit more down, the cash on cash return numbers get a little lower. So all of that is a preface to me answering Dana's question. And so for me personally, $800 a month minimum. A lot of my buildings are still at over $1,000, but let's just use 800 because it's more in line with what you'll see today. So $800 a building, if the LLC like Command Capital owns 3 buildings, right? The 3 buildings would earn $2,400 a month net, times 12 months is just shy of $29,000. And in Command Capital's world, a $10,000 owner, own, I think, just shy of 4% of the company, right? So that's 1,037. 1,037. If you take a look at what you put in, which is $10,000, gives you about a 10% cash on cash return annually for those funds. I went ahead and then did it in my own world. My numbers used to be a little higher. My numbers used to be more like 16% because I was really rigid about that $1,000. But here's what we learned: when you're rigid about that $1,000, there's just not as much to buy. So we relaxed the $1,000 a bit, and now that number is coming down closer and closer to that 10 to 12% cash on cash return. If that is helpful to answer some of those questions. Let me see what else is here. Okay, we answered Julie's question. Can you tell us what you anticipate the fees to be? Marion, you're going to have to give me a little bit more info on that. What do you mean fees?
So would there be any kind of management fee for managing the fund?
Got it. So yeah, let me answer that. I am so sorry. I skipped over 2 of my bullet points on my outline, and that's one of them. So there are two things to be aware of. So I own 10% of the LLC for services, right? Which means I own 10% of the LLC, and I don't have to write a check. because I'm the one who's doing all the work. So for all of the services that I provide to find the properties, buy the properties, manage the investment, do the financing, get all that taken care of, I own 10% of the LLC. So that's not really a fee, but it's something that's important to know. So as you purchase in, you're purchasing in based on the remaining 90%. The property management company that we use is the property management company that I personally use for my own investments. It's Glenstone Management. They are out of I think Southington. Stephen, where are they? Do you know?
I'm not sure if it's Southington or like West Haven. They're around there. I don't remember.
Yeah. Okay. So middle of the state. They're great. We've kind of grown together, and we trust them pretty much with every decision that gets made on the portfolios. They own a whole portfolio themselves, so they're not inexperienced about how to make the decisions and what needs to be spent and how to maximize rents and profits. And so they charge 10% of all rents collected on a monthly basis. And so that's a fee. And then of course, we pay to mow the lawn and shovel the driveways and owner's meters for electric and water, right? Those are all the expenses that when you own a multifamily are on the landlord. Is there investment criteria that can be shared on how purchases, divestitures are made? Only to say, Albano, that again, I stick for the LLCs to the things that I know, which are 3 to 4 family multis in a number of the cities in and around our state that I mentioned. Most of what I own is in Waterbury. Most of what we're looking for lives in Waterbury. And so it's kind of the first place we look, and then we expand outward from there. We go through a whole checklist. We have a spreadsheet to make sure that the money makes sense. We utilize our experience to know that that there's if there's an extra lot to be purchased, we'd rather not, because then you're just paying extra taxes and it's more to mow. Outbuildings, we don't love outbuildings so much just because they're more to maintain and more to insure and all that stuff. But I use the same criteria as I use for my own properties, which is we don't purchase. Here's another important one: we don't purchase things that are like falling down and dilapidated. The whole idea is not to be slumlords. The idea is to buy an investment property that doesn't need a ton done to it, right? Because that's just more cash that you're outlaying. I actually even really spend a smidge more. Like Command Capital, the first 2 they bought, we spent a little bit more to get properties that were in better condition, that still had high rent returns, so that we could maximize the cash for a third one. We had bought something that was a little less money because we financed them. We didn't have to spend that cash instead of on the third one on fixing things up. So we tend to go down the path of better shape, not worse shape. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not. Let me know if you have more. Karen Fry, would these properties be put up for rent as an investment? Yes, absolutely. That's what we buy them and we rent them. So Dave DeVito, I just answered that as well for the most part. For those who are part of the LLC and get to vote on the decisions. Okay, so are the amount of votes an individual gets relative to the number of shares they own? So let's be clear about something. For the most part, you don't get a vote. I just want to be really upfront and clear about that, right? The whole idea of this is that you're leveraging my expertise so that you don't have to worry about it. So if you putting money into an LLC and not having a say about what we buy and when we buy it is like makes you crazy, then this is not for you. If you doing that and saying, you know what, I trust that he's going to make good decisions because he does it for himself and he's done it for Command Capital, and that sounds like a good place for me to put my money, then this is for you. but I want to be really, really clear up front. I don't want anyone to think this is something different, right? The answer, John, to your question on the things that would be voted on, like 3 years from now, if all of a sudden we're going to have a vote about, okay, are we selling these properties or holding on to them? The operating agreement, I believe, states that everyone gets a vote proportional to their interest, right? And so it's explained better in the operating agreement. So if you're interested in reading the operating agreement, say yes all along, and eventually you'll get an operating agreement. And if you decide no after the operating agreement, that's okay too. So it's not one by one by one. It's proportional share is the simple answer to your question. But again, I want to be really, really upfront and clear with everybody that this is not. It's not like we have weekly Monday morning calls to say, hey, what came on the market and are we thumbs up or thumbs down? Command Capital, the investors in Command Capital found out today that I bought their last property over the weekend. We didn't have a conversation about it because that's ultimately what they want, right? Are you buying these cash? No, they're not. So the answer is we have a system set up with Savings Bank of Danbury where we have access to $750,000 of capital that if we need to use, we can use to buy cash and to be more competitive because we're buying with cash. And then as soon as we close, we flip them into amortizing mortgages with Savings Bank of Danbury, who is set up to kind of do that conversion. So the answer is they might start as cash, but none of them will continue as cash. They'll all go into mortgages, which is how we were able to turn $247,000 into three families, right? Because it was just really 3 down payments that we needed to work with. Are K1s issued year end? Yes, absolutely, Chris. That is how that will work. So if you've never been a member of an LLC before, the way you're taxed on any profit, paper or not, right? So if there's no distributions and the company makes paper profit, you do get a K1, which is where that profit is reported, and then your accountant gets to work that into your tax return. How would the managing partner maintain independence? How would members know that the managing partner wouldn't be focused on their interests first? Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'll answer it this way. I think that because one of the questions that was asked the first time around was, are you going to still be buying for yourself? And the answer is yes, absolutely. I intend to keep buying until I either hit some targeted goals or die, whichever comes first, right? And so how do I intend to balance that out? Stephen and I take more risk in what we buy for ourselves a lot of times, and so I balance what we see and make this. And I have discussions with him. So yeah, I'm not going to say another word. Stephen Scott, could you unmute, and could you talk to everybody about the conversation we had Saturday morning about this property, because you found it, I didn't. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like Rick was saying, I mean, we do take more risk with our own properties, and we're always consciously looking for the investment groups, what might be a good fit. And I first found this property. I have alerts set up like you do for your clients or whatever. And I had alerts set up, and I saw this pop up on my phone early in the morning, and I was like, wow, that looks really, really great. And we started looking at it, and it looks perfect. Like it's like a price that's priced perfectly well in Waterbury. I happen to know Waterbury well. Neighborhood, checked it all out. Everything seemed like to check all the boxes. And like, Rick, we should buy this. And it was so clean and so neat that Rick was like, you know what, this needs to be for Command Capital. We're looking for one more for them, but it's perfect for them. I mean, something that we would buy may err on the side of more risky, where this one totally does not. So we jumped on it for Command Capital. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, well, again, I wanted you to say it because the question was asked you were the one who wanted to buy it for us. And the decision that was made is that this really made better sense for Command Capital. And we knew what we were looking for Command Capital. So the best way I can answer the question, Albano, is to say, we do both. We're looking for slightly different things. And the reality of the investment group is that it's limited, right? Command Capital had 3. That was the money that was collected, so we could buy 3. There's way more properties out there that there's like enough to go around, right? So that I don't have to be greedy about the properties I purchase. I also report, when I buy for myself, I only report to me. When I buy on behalf of all of you, I report then to all of you. Right. And so it is crazy important to me to make sure that we're making really good decisions about what we buy and how we buy for the investment groups, as evidenced by the fact that Steve really wanted to buy that for us this weekend. And I redirected that conversation to say, you know what, this is a perfect candidate for Command Capital. I think we should move forward. And that's exactly what we did. So hopefully that answers the question. I can't say to you, you know, we do rock, paper, scissors, or we do, you know, I'll do one here, one there. I make the best decisions possible as properties come to the table, knowing that I have a responsibility to you guys and to myself. And at the end of the day, it ends up being a trust issue. And I know for some of you, you don't know me from a hole in the wall. I get that, right? And so asking for your trust is sometimes a tall order when we don't have a long history together. The good news for this group, however, is I think that members of Command Capital would state out loud that they haven't seen it be an issue in terms of me being an investor for myself and for them, and the properties that they own are good properties. So certainly you could always chat with one of the current investors to see what they have experienced with all that. Can I buy multiple shares of the LLC? So the idea is going to be, everyone's going to kind of come forward and say, if you're interested, you're going to say, I'm interested at 10,000, or I'm interested at 20,000, or 30,000, or 40,000, or 50,000. And then when we figure out how much we have on the table, then we push out the operating agreement. Because again, full disclosure, I'm always only going to be transparent with you. We had, I think we had 3 or 4 people who we were closer to 25 in terms of people who had said yes, and we had 3 or 4, maybe 5 people who pulled back and dropped out after the operating agreement went out, right? And so I can't tell you why. There was nothing in the operating agreement that we didn't discuss ahead of time, and yet sometimes when it gets real and people have to write checks, sometimes they pull back. I know one person who didn't like the way the operating agreement was written because it seemed to give me too much power. And I said, okay, well, you know, that when you're the manager, those are the kinds of powers that one is granted to make decisions on behalf of the LLC. And ultimately, they were just looking for something where they had more say, right? And so, as I said before, if that's your thing, if you really want to be able to say yay, nay, you know, let's tweak this, or let's not spend that, or whatnot, then this is probably not the best place for you to move forward. Whose names will be on the mortgage? How do we qualify? So that's the beauty of what we've set up, is nobody's name has to be on the mortgage. Debbie and I personally guarantee all of the mortgages. And so you get to not only utilize the expertise that we have in this area, but you also get to utilize our money. And our money creates the safety net for these LLCs. And we are willing to take that risk, because what we know is that we're just going to manage them properly, and we won't have the risk of all of a sudden having to write checks to carry a mortgage forward, right? But the way we were able to convince Savings Bank of Danbury to write loans in the name of the LLC is to have mine and Debbie's money personally guarantee it underneath. If that answers that question, Karen. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of these here. Okay, so David, you had your hand up, so let me go to David, and then I'll go back to the chat.
So quick question for you. You mentioned it like at the beginning of COVID where you had two people that weren't paying. So if you're in this LLC and you've only, let's say, bought one property and all of a sudden something happens and two of the three tenants aren't paying, you've got the mortgage, how do you cover the costs? Because I would assume one rent doesn't cover the entire mortgage. What happens if it's operating in the beginning as you're going through this buying process? If it's there's losses, if you will.
Yeah, so great question. And the way I run these investment companies is the same way I run my own investments, which is the same way I run our market centers, right? And that is conservatively. And what that means is if we, so Command Capital collected $247,000, right? We spent what we spent on the first two properties. We flipped them into mortgages. We didn't have the issues that David just talked about. However, we used funds. Had we run into some additional issues, it's why I refused to go and buy a third property until we had either an opportunity come around where we could spend less, or I should really say, and we spent 4 to 6 months collecting rents to build our cash reserves so that we could make the next property purchase and not deplete a reserve account, right? So the answer is $10,000 to $20,000 always sits over here in reserve. I'm okay with 10 if the properties are cash flowing well, because what I know is that that builds up more quickly, and then and so we would simply utilize those cash reserves to pay the mortgage were something to go wrong. What I had promised to the Command Capital folks, which I make the same promise, is that the other reason why this is relatively safe is that you do have the safety net of mine and Debbie's funds underneath all of this, because again, we personally guarantee it all. So if all of a sudden everything goes to hell in a handbasket, well, we're responsible anyway. So is it possible if there was a disaster that happened where we would have to fund some of that and then earn it back over time? That's not off the table either. And again, that's all kind of outlined in the operating agreement. The good news is if we didn't have a disaster in the last 18 months, all of my properties maintained on average about 85% of rent. I had many buildings that were at 100% the entire time, and just a couple that we had to work through some issues on. But it's about being smart with how the money is used, and hopefully that answers that question.
It does. Just one follow-up question.
Yes, sir.
From a liability standpoint, with tenants and so on and so forth, does the LLC have a like an umbrella policy, or are you just relying solely on the individual property insurance? Yeah,
excellent question. No, I don't. I'll use the word conservative again, right? I don't believe in the liability for homeowners being enough, right? Because that's usually only $500,000, and so Command Capital has a I think it's a $3 million umbrella policy over. I think it's $3 million. I have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure it's the $3 million umbrella liability, commercial umbrella liability over each of the homeowners policies. So it's a total then of $3.5 million, because you have the $500,000 for each property's policy and then the $3 million on top of it. And I have $5 million for my own properties, but that's because Command Capital has 3 properties. So 3 million seemed like a reasonable number. I have 22 buildings, and so I have a $5 million umbrella on top of that. Just by the way, after $5 million, you go to reinsurance. For those of you who have an insurance background, reinsurance now all of a sudden it just gets ridiculously expensive. So that's why I maxed mine out at $5 million. Great question, David. Thank you for that. Sure thing. Tama, look at your email if you want the property address for Command Capital. When do you need to know for this round? So great question. I'm going to get there, Meredith. Yes, Chris, thank you for making that point. It is the trade-off. Are you putting all your properties into one LLC or establishing a different LLC for each property? Nope, one LLC for, it depends on how many properties, but generally speaking, one LLC. Command Capital owns the three properties. If it got much bigger, we may look at something different. But between my insurance folks and my attorneys, I don't own any of the 22 buildings that I own personally outside in LLCs. We instead look to massively insure instead of incurring the expenses of 22 different entities and 22 different tax returns and 22 different, X, Y's, and Z's. And there are different schools of thought on that's either really smart or really stupid. It's how we do our personal ones. And again, Command Capital owns 3 with just the one LLC. It looks like that might be all the questions. Anybody else have any question, or did I skip anybody's question in the chat? No? All right, so with that, let me give you next steps. We are going to look at likely a kind of a time horizon of November, right? And mostly that's because I am going away, and so I'm leaving on the 9th, and I won't be back until the Monday. I will be back on Pi Day, right? The Monday before Thanksgiving. And so in that interim, we're going to look for you guys to make some decisions. You'll have follow-up emails from me about what that looks like, and you'll kind of raise your hand and say, yes, I am interested at this level. What I then do is kind of put all the money together to see what that looks like. Send out draft copies of an operating agreement, have you review the operating agreement. And once you've reviewed the operating agreement, if you're still a go forward, then we finalize who's going to contribute what and what those percentages are based on the final. Redo the operating agreement to reflect all of that. And then we start signing and writing checks, which we then use to open the bank account. Once the bank account is open, we're ready to go and start buying. We start shopping, however, as soon as the operating agreement is finalized, right? Because we can kind of get a head start on buying those properties once we know who's in and who's out and at what levels and whatnot. Sherry Lee.
Sort of new to this. This is great. Thank you so much, Rick. But is there at any point where we would have to have an out-of-pocket expense during the 3 years or whatever? Is there anything that could come up? I know David Lee spoke about that a little, so thank you.
Yes. So another great question, and it's I cannot, because I don't have a crystal ball and I can't see the future all that clearly. So I cannot sit here today and say the world won't, take a sideways turn on us, and all of a sudden they're for some reason that I can't think of today, we would need to have a cash call. Again, I can tell you that in 8 years with 22 different buildings, I've not had those issues. I've not had to come out of pocket, right? And so is that because of what I buy, how I buy them, how they're managed? I tend to think the answer to that is yes. Maybe there's a little luck thrown in there, that we just haven't had a really big issue. So I can't say to you that there would never be some kind of a cash call. Again, you'd be a member of a corporation of the LLC, and that if something happened and there was no money to cover it, one of the paths that we could go down is cash call. I'd have to read the operating agreement again, Sherry Lee, to be really specific with you around what those circumstances might be. And remember that one of the benefits that you have is instead of making this difficult, right? Because the only reason, look, here's what's real. I don't get to retire off of buying properties in this investment group, right? So somebody the last time around said, well, I'm not sure it's really fair that you get 10% right off the bat. And I said, okay, then this is not an investment for you, right? Because that's how it's structured. Trust me, I'm not getting rich off of owning 10% of a couple of properties. That's not the idea. The idea is to keep it fair, because it is my time and effort that gets invested in all these things. The reason I do it is because investing in real estate has been really, really good to me, right? And it's changed my ability to do things in my life that I'm not sure I thought I would do. It's changed my net worth dramatically. It's been really, really good to me, better than I ever thought it could be when I first started doing it. And I just have this desire, because we're in business together, to share that information with you and give people an outlet, if they don't or can't do it themselves, to at least dip their toe in the pool. That's the whole idea of why we're doing this, right? And so maybe it sounds dorky, maybe it sounds whatever, but that is the honest truth of why this is on the table. We want to give you an opportunity, if you desire, to have this experience, whether it's a start of an experience that you then branch out and start doing it on your own, because you get some experience in there and say, wow, that's kind of cool. Or it's how you do what you do, because you don't have to spend a whole lot of time doing it. I'm far more interested in creating passive income for those of you who don't have it, or more passive income for those of you who do have some, than anything else. I can't remember what I was answering, but hopefully that helps. Oh yes, Sherry Lee. So the idea, that's right. So the idea of having our money, mine and Debbie's money, underneath as a safety net is just another way to answer that, right? So the answer might be you'd never have a cash call, because Debbie and I would look at that and say, okay, for that $25,000, instead of going back and asking everybody for a piece, let's just cover that. And then the investment would sign a piece of paper saying the next 25,000 that's earned comes back to us to repay us. And then we go back to profiting, right? So it's just another way to look at it. Whew. What else?
I have one question. It's Irfan Ahmad.
Yes, sir.
You said for 36 months, what happened going to do after 36 months? We could continue this investment group, or are we going to finish this group or make a new one? Or in this, and second question, the same time, in this period of 36 months, nobody life guarantee, somebody die, what happened going to do his money?
Yeah, so great questions, Irfan. And so answer to question number one, after 3 years, we all get to sit in a room together, hopefully not on Zoom, unless it's just for convenience, but we get to sit together and say, okay, so we're 3 years out. Anybody can decide to sell their interest at this point in time. My answer, just so you all know my thinking, my answer, unless all of a sudden the property is worth 3 times what we paid for it, right? Which when you buy in Waterbury is usually not the case, right? So unless the property is all of a sudden worth some spectacular amount of money, my answer to that question will always be, just because 3 years has gone by, we just keep on keeping on, right? It's the cash flow opportunity of making money by having invested the 10 or the 20 or whatever $1,000 one time. I don't expect to sell the properties that I own. I expect that will turn into a legacy to leave my children, right? So that's my answer to the 3 years. The first question. The second question for the 3 years is, I have to read the operating agreement to see exactly how it's read. I think how it reads is, one, if someone is looking to sell their interests, there's some process by which the investors, other investors, have an opportunity to buy them out. And if nobody does, then I think I have a responsibility as the manager to buy them out, right? So I get a right, and then I get a responsibility. Everybody else gets a right without the responsibility. So if nobody else raises their hand and says, hey, you know what, I'll buy Jeannie's shares because well, let's not make her die. Let's have her retire and sell, right? So if nobody raises their hand and says, yes, I'll pay for Jeannie's 10% or whatever that is, then it falls to me as the manager of the LLC. I then have no choice, but I go and buy them personally, right? So that the LLC remains balanced. I think that's how it's written in the operating agreement, so that everybody has a right, and if no one chooses that right, I have a responsibility to buy them out. Trust me when I say the operating agreement is written. It's not terribly favorable to me. So as you're reading it, you can kind of look at that and say, yeah, I'm kind of glad I'm not the manager. And again, it's written that way to create as much comfort for anybody who is nervous about something like this as possible. Because I get it. It's a lot of money. 3 years is a long time. I understand it. And the things are built that way to create stability and to keep me from pulling my hair out as people make different decisions. But the idea is a sound one. And again, it's worked well for Command Capital so far. Hopefully that answers that. Anybody else? Yes, John.
Are there any participants that you know of, or maybe somebody could reach out privately in the first round who might be open to kind of sharing their experience so far? I know it's a short time frame since it initiated, but just to kind of get the layman's view of it.
Yeah, so people on this call who are partners in Command Capital are, so I'll read them off and then you can contact them, John. You can pick somebody. We have, let's see, we have Paul Leibowitz, we have Tama Murphy, we have Chris DiBiase, we have Jody Boxer, we have Dan Lydon. I don't think I missed anybody. Did I miss anybody who's a member of Command Capital? I don't think so. I think those are the 5. So they're on this call as well. You can certainly reach out. Guys, I just speak on your behalf that John could reach out and ask you some questions. I think everybody's okay with that. So, anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns, queries? Going once, going twice. Okay, so watch for a follow-up email. Give me 24 hours to get that out, please, and there'll be some directions. If this sounds interesting to you and you want to kind of move forward, follow the directions in that email. What it will be is raising your hand saying, yes, I am interested and interested at this monetary amount. I collect all of that. I put it all together. Then we start getting real hot and heavy about getting you operating agreement drafts to review, and then if you're still in after that, then we'll get clarity. And so that's probably going to take about a month or so to get done, because I'm going to be gone for a chunk of November, and then we have Thanksgiving at the end of the month. So about a month from today, we'll know better about the direction we're going to head, who's in, who's out, and what kind of funds we have, because that's the other piece of this. If there's 6 people with $10,000 each, it gets a lot harder to have this launch, because there's just not enough. There's not enough money, right? At that level, we'd be looking at the down payment on one property. So it's all a balancing act. Let's see what we get, and then we go from there. Guys, I hope this was helpful. Paul, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to throw in a little sidebar, and in this sidebar is most of the reasons why I joined the first time around. I had 2 calls this weekend from investors who were trying to buy a piece of property in Waterbury, and they both needed pre-approvals right away because they found a fabulous property. And guess who bought it? You did.
Really?
So this is why I joined this LLC, because when you join this LLC, you get Rick's ability, and you get Steve, spearing him on, saying, go, go, go. And they did. They came up with a 3rd property that was phenomenal. I haven't gotten the calls yet, but I know they're coming from the 2 people that I pre-qualified. They'll probably tell me now somebody else beat us.
Oh, that is hysterical. And just so you know, guys, Paul had not told me that until just right now. That is absolutely hysterical.
I didn't know that you bid on Crown Street, so now I do.
Well, that's awesome. So yay for us all, right? That's excellent. All right, guys, I'm always so excited to be able to bring opportunities and look ahead about how we can all make money together. So let me know how I can answer questions. Reach out to me if you have any other questions that you think of. Watch for the follow-up email, and I'll be excited to see who's in and how we're going to move forward together. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you soon.